Right before I start to ask people about their numbers, I ask sellers, what is 7 cubed? And it's really weird, but I'm trying to throw people off because interviewing salespeople is really hard because they're really good at selling and like maybe fudging the numbers. So if you can get someone on the heels a little bit. And another thing is I think in sales processes, you always get asked questions you don't know the answers to. You never know what's coming your way. So just seeing how someone acts in a very uncomfortable situation tells me a lot about how they're going to react when a prospect is mean to them or throws a question they don't know at them.
What's an example of a story that someone gave you that was really good and you're like, okay, that's a very positive signal?
Yeah, it's always just, oh yeah, I had this really big deal that I closed and I made a lot of money from it. Like a lot of people will just like index on the biggest deal they've ever closed versus sales can take you in so many different directions. To me, it's, oh yeah, like I worked this really large deal and it was really cool because it was the biggest deal I've ever closed. Like to me, that doesn't scream passion.
What part of the process do you run that cold call simulation?
With the CEO, and that's like the second round. So it's 30 minutes with me, and then you come in for 3-hour sessions, and one of those hour sessions is with our CEO.
What are red flags that help you see past their resume?
We try to do some anti-selling in our sales process. We're not afraid to share, right? We are in office 5 days a week. We are working long hours. Everyone's here pretty early. No one's leaving before 7:30. Very open at sharing that up front because the last thing either of us want is to be in a situation we aren't happy in. And you can tell in literally 2 seconds by someone's facial reaction when you say that. 99% of people say, oh yes, that's okay. The ones that mean it, you can tell versus the people that go, yeah, that's good. Versus that's what I'm looking for. And early in my career, I want to grind. And you can really tell the two differences there.
Welcome back to another session where we talk about the best sales hiring tactics with some of the best leaders in sales. Today, we've got Jacob Fleischer, who is the head of sales at Attention, one of the fastest growing startups in the sales acceleration space. They do some really cool things. He started as their very first sales hire, and they are now approaching 8 figures in ARR. I did not misspeak there. It's been a wild ride, and I'm really excited for this because I've known Jacob for a while, and he is one of the hardest working people I know in sales, and he's building a team just like him. So really excited to get into this with you.
Yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. It'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome. So what are your favorite interview questions that you like to ask sales rep in 2025?
I think for me, I have one that's like very untraditional that gets a lot of pushback, and I'll explain why. Right before I start to ask people about their numbers of like their quota, I ask sellers, what is 7 cubed? And it's really weird, but I'm trying to throw people off because interviewing salespeople is really hard because they're really good at selling and like maybe fudging the numbers. So if you can get someone on the heels a little bit. And then another thing is I think in sales processes, you always get asked questions you don't know the answers to. You never know what's coming your way. So just seeing how someone acts in a very uncomfortable situation tells me a lot about how they're going to react when a prospect is mean to them or throws a question they don't know at them. So I think the way that people respond, like some people literally like shiver and say, why are you asking me that? Or some people are like, listen, I probably don't know the answer. I'm down to give it a try, or can I just use my calculator? To me, that's a great answer versus like, why are you asking me that? And that tells me a ton about a person. Another one is I'm a firm believer that a lot of the best sales reps sometimes, act now and apologize later. So I'll always ask people for their story. When's a time that, you knew you might get your wrist slapped for something, but you thought like overall it'd be better for your deal or for the business. So you acted now and would just apologize later afterwards. So I think that's really good to hear how people operate off script and kind of navigate an organization. And then for me, passion about sales is really important. I want someone who loves what they do. So I always ask people of what is like the sales story you tell at Thanksgiving? When people are like, oh, you're in sales, right? And you can really start to figure out, is someone there for a paycheck or do they really love sales? And do they have that story that like drives and motivates them that they think about and keeps them going forward?
I want to break a few of these down real quick. So going back to what is 7 cubed, right? The main thing you're looking for is someone that's just going to lean into the challenge and not shy away from it, right? It doesn't really matter if they get it right or wrong, but you want someone that's willing to take it on.
Be comfortable being uncomfortable.
And then the act now, apologize later. What's an example of a story that someone gave you that was really good and you're like, okay, that's a very positive signal?
What was a good example? Oh, I have a good one. Someone didn't have any budget to travel, and they were supposed to get approval to visit clients on site and had a really big deal that they were working and weren't given approval to visit the client. So they booked the flights themselves and just went and didn't tell their manager that they were flying across the country to go meet this prospect that they were working a big deal with, and went on to build a really good rapport and relationship and close the deal. And when they literally flew back, wasn't in the office for the day, and the manager was like, "Where were you?" And they shared the story. It was like, that was going to win me the deal. That not getting approved was going to lose it to me. So I did what I had to do.
That's amazing. And I'm just curious, did they book it on the company expense card or on their
No,
own?
they ate it themselves. It didn't get approved.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. That is a good Thanksgiving story as well. But any other good examples of that Thanksgiving story? And maybe actually, let's go the opposite way. Any stories where someone tries to share their passion about sales that isn't very good?
Yeah, it's always just, oh yeah, I had this really big deal that I closed and I made a lot of money from it. Like a lot of people will just like index on the biggest deal they've ever closed versus sales can take you in so many different directions. Like to me, it's, oh yeah, like I worked this really large deal and it was really cool because it was the biggest deal I've ever closed. Like to me, that doesn't scream passion. Hearing about how there was like some weird complexity and multi-threading, and one of my reps now, and this was the answer to his question, really big deal on the finish line, who he was talking to just quite couldn't get it over. And he didn't know exactly who the EBI was. His person was kind of gatekeeping, saying he could get it done. So he cold called all the executives at the company, and the CFO answered and told the CFO that, like, hey, this is what's going on. And the next day, the CFO signed the contract. And he knew he was taking a risk, but he felt he was dead without it. So, like, to me, that's passion.
That's awesome. Let's talk through your interview process a little bit. Just give us a step-by-step interview process that you guys are typically running for salespeople. And then I'm curious, what are the parts of the process that give you the most conviction that someone's going to be really strong?
So right now, our process is for AEs, it's 30 minutes on Zoom with me, and then come back in for an hour session with me, which I can talk about in more detail what that is later. You do an hour with our head of growth, and you do an hour with our CEO. If that super day goes well, you come back in to meet our CTO and other co-founder, and then just have a bunch of interviews. I barely call them interviews with the other AEs. And it's more of an opportunity for you to get to know the team, understand the culture, see if it's a good fit for you, and see if the AEs feel the same way about the candidate. And then to me, the single most important part of the interview process is the first interview. When I ask at the end, I always leave 10 minutes. Do you have any questions? Can I answer for you? To me, the single biggest tell if someone's going to be a good seller is how curious are they as a human being. And when they ask their questions, I don't really care that much about what questions they ask. What I really care about is after I give my answer, are they just reading the next question on their script? Or are they critically thinking about what I just said? And has it sparked curiosity and interest to keep asking questions and have conversations and turn that one question into a dialogue versus just like stock reading questions because they know they have to? I think that there's such a strong signal when people continue to ask questions on the back of your answer to their questions, because it's kind of what sales is.
What are some examples of good questions people ask you during that part?
It's a good question. I think a lot of it is a little more tactically about our business. We'll ask about our customers, who are our best customers, right? And that's a question I get a lot. And sometimes I'll say one, two, and three, engine.com, Scale AI, Bamboo HR. And someone will say, great, next question. But then a really good seller will be like, interesting, like Bamboo HR, what were the reasons why they decided to go with you over other vendor? Like, how did that come to be? What did that POC look like? And then you end up having this like deep conversation. And like, to me, that's like, you can see their eyes light up hearing about our process, our product, versus just like questions to check a box.
Yeah, that follow-up question is so important. I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because it's someone that is asking about those things you mentioned, or even, hey, these are three very different companies. What made them really good fits versus other clients? And those, when they're thinking about that next level, it shows you, right, they're going to have the depth of thinking they're going to need, because in a sales process, you're going to get a lot of surface level answers, and it's your responsibility to figure out what they truly mean or what their answer is behind that.
Yeah, and I'd argue that just like natural curiosity is one of the single most important traits in a seller. And it's probably also the hardest thing to coach, if not almost uncoachable. So to me, getting that right is really important.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you want someone to come to the job with. It's really hard to teach. They have to develop that over years and years. One other question I have about your sales process. You didn't mention any kind of mock discovery call or anything like that. Do you guys have that as part of your process?
Yeah. So after the 30 minutes, the hour with me, instead of it being a mock sales call or a mock demo, it's a mock pipeline session. So I have them bring 2 or 3 deals they've won, 2 or 3 deals they've lost. Some make a presentation, and we run it like I run my pipeline sessions with my reps. And I try to understand, where did the deal come from? Why did you make these decisions? What did you learn from them? What was the compelling event? What were the cost of inactions? Really starting to grill them on the deals and trying to understand the learnings. What would they do differently? I really want to deeply understand their sales brain, why and how they make decisions, and then how they use the outcomes of those decisions as learnings to get better as sellers over time. I love learning the progression of different lost deals because it tells me, like, if you're losing the same 3 deals for the same reasons, it's telling me that you're not applying yourself to learn and get better. So for me, that is a really powerful mock session. Me and my reps do pipeline every single week, one-on-one. So it tells me how we're going to work together, but me more so, it tells me about, how you think as a seller and why you make certain decisions.
That's interesting. You're the first person I've spoken with that has that as a part of the process, but I really like it because it teaches you a lot about their approach and how they handle things on a day-to-day basis, and it gives you things to compare it to. So you get different deals to compare it to and how they approach different things. I liked it a lot. In terms of actually doing a disco call, do you guys do that at all during the process, or is not something you touch?
So we make everyone go through like a cold call simulation, which I think is fun, but we're not doing any discovery calls. I think for me is, if you can tell the appropriate and right story of your deals that you've worked, I think you'll be capable, right? Combining the curiosity and the storytelling and sales brain, like, I think that tells me everything I need to know.
What part of the process do you run that cold call simulation?
Yeah, that's what Anis does that in his.
So with the CEO.
Yeah, with the CEO, and that's like the second round. So it's 30 minutes with me, and then you come in for 3 hour sessions, and one of those hour sessions is with our CEO.
Very cool. Let's talk about the best rep you've ever hired. Thinking back on that, was there anything particular that stood out in the interview or a trait that they seemed to have that gave you a lot of confidence they would be successful?
One of my best reps today, you could just feel, it's so incredible. You can just feel through the Zoom and then in person that, like, he would die for you. You knew no matter what, you were in good hands. And he brought this energy that was incredibly unmatched, that it's weird to describe, but you can just absolutely feel how much he genuinely cared and wanted this role. And then his follow up process was incredible. He would call me to check in, he would shoot texts over, and he did it in a way where it wasn't annoying and caring, and mirrored the energy that he brought to conversations. And to me, it was just like such a no-brainer to hire him. Even if some of the sales stories weren't like as acute as others, you just knew that this person wasn't going to lose, and he hasn't yet. He's been our top performing rep.
What about red flags? Are there any red flags that you've learned to spot early on that, let's say, this person's not going to be fit, even if they're coming from other startups or they sold something similar? What are red flags that help you see past their resume?
Yeah, we try to do some anti-selling in our sales process. We're not afraid to share, right? We are in office 5 days a week. We are working long hours. Everyone's here pretty early. No one's leaving before 7:30. We're very open at sharing that up front, because the last thing either of us want is to be in a situation we are unhappy in. And you can tell in literally 2 seconds by someone's facial reaction when you say that. 99% of people say, "Oh, yes, that's okay." The ones that mean it, you can tell, versus the people that go, "Yeah, that's good," versus "That's what I'm looking for. I'm early in my career. I want to grind." And you can really tell the two differences there. I think another red flag I typically see is when people tell their story of their career. I'm a really firm believer that every career jump and career move should be incredibly intentional to get you to your next goal. Your previous experience should have given you new learnings and insights on where you want to go to next. And the reason why you went somewhere next was fueled by that learning. So when people are like, oh yeah, I took an AE role here and then I got offered more money here, but then this company seemed cool, so I did that, versus saying I was a finance major and decided I really wanted to get into financial technology, but at this larger company, there was too much bureaucracy and I felt like I'm an operator and I loved collaborating cross functionally, but it wasn't part of my responsibility. So going early stage enabled me to both sell, which was a passion, but also operate, which is a passion. Like those are two totally different answers. So if someone's not highly intentional, it's a massive red flag for me.
One, intentional is one of my favorite words, and I very much agree with what you're saying there. And two, like you and I had a similar conversation when you were in final stages for this role at Attention. So I know you live it and breathe it yourself. I guess the flip side to that is someone could say, "Hey, I want to join Attention as an early AE so that I can be a part of that growth story and really have an awesome name and product on my resume, so that one day I can use that for my next role, or I can use that for whatever the next step is in my career." Does that scare you away at all, or are you all right knowing they're hitching their ride to a really fast moving company as a 2 or 3 year move for their career?
Yeah, I think it depends, right, on the other stories. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to like join what you think is a rocket ship. I think that is very natural in people's approach. I think there needs to be a lot more context on the why of that, and then I'm not against it. I think it's very circumstantial, right? If someone doesn't isn't a high performer and they're not being intentional, they just see a name a lot on LinkedIn. It seems like I can grow with them. They're growing fast. That's very different than having a more compelling reasons to join a fast growing company.
I got two more questions for you. First, what metrics in a candidate's track record are the most important to you?
What metrics are most important? I think for me, metrics are really tricky because I don't think they always tell a full story. So obviously, you want to see overachieving quota. I always ask about like sales cycle length, velocity. What do you do to speed up your sales cycles? I'm more interested in like the complexity of the sales cycle. Like I'll always tell me about a time you multi-threaded, tell me a time you tried to multi-thread and fail. Like I'm more interested in like, those less data points, but data points than like I'm at X percent of my number. And because I think it's just really hard to actually know how meaningful it is in practice.
Yeah, I think you're right. Quota is always the forecast at best, and you don't know all of the little things that may impact their performance, right? Who knows if they got a good territory, they got handed really great accounts. It's really hard to say. So I think the nuances, which is a theme for you, is like how they approach things is really insightful, right? Hey, typical sales cycles like this, what are some examples of you being able to speed up that sales cycle? How did you multi-thread to try to get more people on board faster? I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, last question. If you look back at the hires you've made, is there any one mistake that you would redo? And I'm curious what it taught you.
I think for me, it was one of my first hires here. I became very attached to their hunger to learn the new AI landscape of toolings. They talked a lot about being a power user of Clay and knew a lot about the future tech stack when like Clay was people weren't widely talking about it. So they had a lot of high level knowledge of the space. And because that was very differentiated from a lot of people we talked to, I was still very early in my interviewing day. Now I've interviewed hundreds of people. At that, it was like tens, maybe less. And I think I became a little too attached to the love of tooling and knowledge there and forgot around my real process of digging into like the sales piece of it. And they ended up joining, it didn't work out. And now it's totally changed the way that I think about interviewing. Like I believe that for me, interviewing is a de-risking exercise, especially for a startup. So I basically am just like in my head, it's almost like this risk matrix mental model of each data point of doesn't make sense. Like it's pretty aggressive, but there's like some things if someone was laid off, right? That doesn't mean they can't be great, but like you can't argue inherently it makes them more risky than someone else that wasn't. So throughout the entire interview process, I'm looking to how do I de-risk as much as possible and use all of these data points to help me tell a risk story, because at a startup you can't miss. You absolutely cannot miss. So if you take that approach, you are going to pass on really good people. But if you also take that approach, your chances of missing on someone you hired is a lot lower. So that person that ended up not working out was a BDR. My AEs were full. No one's left. A year later, everyone's at their number. Everyone's crushing it. Yeah. So to me, it's like, how do I de-risk as much as possible throughout the sales cycle using all of these different pointers that I've learned to get who I think is going to crush it.
That's awesome. Man, this was great. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think I learned a few new things, which I really liked. I'm sure other people will as well.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, Jason.